good to see a nice turnout for a 11 o'clock session on a Sunday morning. Uh, that's BLF. I think it attracts good, good audience, and we hope to have an excellent conversation here. So the theme of this session is the leaderboard, which is very broad. So I asked Sai Krishna, one of the BLF team members, what are we supposed to do with this theme? He said, just go for it. Do what you feel like doing. And with an eminent panel here, not just eminent, prolific authors, leaders in their own domain, Dr. Gurcharan Das, Dr. Balasubramaniam, and Pankaj Mishra. Please give them a huge round of applause. Yeah. Okay, this session is about leadership. And most of us could agree that today the world is facing through a huge leadership crisis. We have many leaders, but few really transformative leaders. How are we going to address this? We have the three authors here. In their books, they have addressed these issues, topics quite deeply, and there's a lot for us to take from them. Yeah, I think I should stand. So let me first go to Mr. Gurcharan Das. No exaggeration here that he's written perhaps the best, most persuasive and insightful series of books, and you can see the number of books he's written there. I put out a collage there. And I'm a huge fan of Mr. Gurcharan Das. And his book, the first book that I read, India Unbound, in 2006, bowled me over. And I'm very sure most of the business leaders in India and other leaders as well, they got fuel for their thoughts and real understanding of India's past, present, and the future. And he says that that book has done really well. It sold more than 100,000 copies. Congratulations. So first I go to Mr. Gurcharan Das. If you see the range of books that he's written, the one I'm going to, his latest is his memoir. I think his latest is the Dilemma of an Indian Liberal, which was published in March or April this year. And late last year, he wrote his memoir. It's called Another Sort of Freedom. So we all have to wonder, what is this another sort of freedom? I think you can ask him later what that is. So as a first question to him, I'm going to ask him what leadership lessons we can learn and pick up from his book, The Difficulty of Being Good. Leadership and the difficulty of being good. Do we have a challenge there?
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And yes, the second time you were right. The first time you were wrong. I'm not a doctor. I've been to the hospital many times, but that still doesn't qualify me to being a doctor. Anyway, the subtitle of The Difficulty of Being Good is The Subtle Art of Dharma. And in India, we have, from the beginning, a profound thinking about leadership through the concept of Raj Dharma. Now, dharma, of course, is a very frustrating word. You know, it changes with the context. It can mean law, it can mean religion, it can mean duty, it can mean virtue. But think about it, basically it's about trying to do the right thing. And in terms of Raj Dharma, the Artha Shastra is very clear, reminds you that the main ideal of Dharma, Raj Dharma, is to benefit the people and not benefit you or your power. So don't think about yourself. Think about your people. And really, it's treating the ruler in a way, because, the tendency of the people is to lift the ruler up as a godlike figure. And that is what the Artha Shastra is telling us, no. And it tells him that, look, you are allowed, you don't own the land. Unlike in China, where the emperor owned the land. Here, you don't own the land, but yes, you're allowed to collect taxes, which are, the maximum you can collect is Shat Bhaga. Shat means sixth, 1/6. 1/6 means the tax rate of Singapore, 15%. That is the just tax rate. Anything above that is extractive. And you are practicing adharma. And even that 15% is, you are allowed to collect that only if you can show that you have spent it on what today we will call infrastructure, on roads, on lighting, on cleaning the streets, and so on. So it puts very clear, and we have a tendency to judge our rulers on the basis of, giving them a halo. And what it's saying ultimately is that a ruler should be modest. In a democracy, we should remember that. A democracy is best run by modest human beings. And what do I mean by modest? Well, if I may, the dedication to the memoir is, it says, to the happy few who don't take themselves too seriously. That is modesty. Take your work seriously, but not yourself seriously. So the tendency we have is to also look at the private lives of our leaders. That's a tendency. We all like to do that. But in fact, that is wrong. What you need is to look at the consequences. It's saying benefit the people. Don't worry what his personal habits are. And the way to distinguish this is a very, I'll tell you a little incident. There was a child who was drowning on a beach in Goa about 20 years ago. There was a report in the Times of India that I read, and the reporter from the Times of India went to him, and she said to him, "You're a hero. Why did you do it?" And he very sheepishly confesses that they are a college party, and he was trying to impress his girlfriend when he jumped into the sea. And she says, "Oh, but then you're not a hero." But I said, reading the account, the child was saved. That's benefiting the people. What difference does it make if he's trying to impress his girlfriend? So this is, I think, how we should judge our leaders. We want them to do the right thing, to benefit the people, not worry about their personal habits.
Yeah.
We want them to be modest and not bigger than life.
Thank you, Mr. Das. Yeah. Coming to Dr. Balasubramaniam, he's a very interesting and exciting personality. He's a citizen activist And he's been arrested once, he tells me. Yeah, and he fights for the tribals in Karnataka. And is a leadership coach. He teaches leadership at Cornell University. And his latest assignment is that he teaches aspiring IAS bureaucrats how to be leaders, not just blind followers. So, thank you so much for being here,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Balu. And he's here because of his amazingly researched book. And the title of that book is here, The Power Within, the Leadership Legacy of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And let me ask him, Dr. Balu, while I was searching for how many books there are on Prime Minister Modi, I found 20. So I asked him, there are 20 books. What made you write another book? He corrected me, there are not 20, there are 400 books on Prime Minister Modi, but still, I believe that I had to say what I've said in the book. Over to you.
What is the question now?
The question is, why the book?
Why the book? Okay. Well, why the book on leadership is what I'd like to answer first, and then why is Modi written about? You know, today when you talk about the Prime Minister, I think there only seem to be only two views. We are so polarized in our thinking and outlook that either you're called a Modi Bhakt, which after writing the book, people think I am. And so I keep telling them, don't judge the book by the cover. First read it. Or it's a critic. So the 400 books, why I wrote a book on leadership is teaching and being trained at Harvard on leadership. I thought I've learned leadership. And then I realized a very painful, something happened to me when I was living with the tribals in the forest in Bandipur. I had sued the government and won the case, and we had got land released for the tribals. So it was a big heroic achievement, and fully non-violently. I'd gone to the Human Rights Commission, etc., etc., etc. And then that evening I thought, when I go into the colony, tribal colonies as we call them, they'll garland me and worship me, and somebody will see me as the next Schweitzer, and possibly a Nobel Prize will follow. And Kempaiah, the chieftain, whom I've written about in virtually every book of mine, was very upset and sullen. And he looked at me and said, "You've destroyed us." This is to a person who had spent 20 years of his, now 30, but at that time 15, 20 years of my prime life with them, living like them, amidst them. And I was quite shocked. And then I asked him, what do you mean by this? And he said, well, you are from the cities. I basically grew up in Bangalore. The first time I saw an Indian village was when I went into this tribal colony near Mysore. And he said, you never understand us. You people have a different benchmark of measuring life. You think owning land is life. We never had individual ownership at all. We lived it as a commune. And now you have destroyed us by getting us land. And more importantly, he said, the identity of an Adivasi, or Adivasiyat as you can call it, comes from Jal, Jungle and Jameen. It does not come from anything else. We are so embedded into nature that you can't separate us. But now giving us one house, one land, you've actually taken away our identity. You won the case, but we lost our identity. And then he asked me the next question. He asked, what is your identity? And it was confusing. Should I answer that I'm from Bangalore? I did my medicine at Mysore. I went to Harvard. I'm an NGO civil society activist. It's so confusing. And that's when I said, I need to figure out an identity, because we live in a time when fragmenting our identities has become the norm today. Integrating our identity seems to be a lost cause. So I realized that I have no real identity of my own, so could I align to the identity of being just Indian, the Bharatiya Parampara and its identity, a civilizational identity. And I knew nothing about it. You know, I grew up on Tom and Jerry and Phantom comics and Mandrake and stuff like that. Chanda Mama was just incidental. Amar Chitra Katha was just quickly read and finish it off. I can challenge any of you here that the depth of our children's understanding of scripture, the Jataka tales or Panchatantra and the leadership message in them, is something which we ignored. And that's exactly what my life was built around, and it was very shameful to me. And it took me 15 years of going deep into, I began with Panchatantra, Jataka tales, the Bhagavad Gita, Shankara's works, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, a lot of the Upanishads, and realized I had discovered, tried to understand our scriptures from a leadership lens. We look at it as a spiritual tool, but I saw it from a leadership lens because I believe I don't believe in leaders. So first of all, that's something that doesn't exist in my thinking at all. I only believe each of us have opportunities to exercise leadership. Some of us decide to do so, some of us don't, and you don't have to be a 24/7 doer of that. And in that that's how the Indian scriptures looks at leadership. And so I had done so much of research, 15 years of research, I thought there's no flesh and blood character I can describe to write the book about. So I wrote a book called Leadership Lessons for Daily Living, auto rickshaw drivers, street vendors, and how they express leadership. Because we confuse leadership to authority. You know, we think a CEO is a leader. We think a prime minister or a president is a leader of a country. I don't believe so. I'm not saying it's right, wrong, I just don't believe so. So I discovered so much, I want to articulate it, I couldn't find anybody. 3.5 years ago, all of a sudden the call came from Delhi, and this commission, it's not to train IAS on leadership. It is to reform India's bureaucracy itself. 20 million civil servants of the national government, 20 million in our states, to make them think and act like karmyogis, from karmacharis to karmyogis. So Mission Karmyogi is the name of the mission. The Prime Minister heads it. So I had an opportunity reporting to him, watching him in action, seeing him work. So after a year, I realized a lot of what I had discovered, I could explain some of his insights, his decision making, his actual life, which is very different from the politician Modi. So I want to be very clear. I only analyzed the Prime Minister Modi and his actions. And after a year, I took up the courage and went and asked him. I didn't want to lose out all my research. I thought I can write a book finally now. So I asked him, can I write a book on you? And he said, if it's on me, don't write it. That's when he said, 400 से ज़्यादा books है मेरे बारे में, और एक मोदी भक्त का book नहीं चाहिए. And incidentally, I'm not a Modi Bhakt, and he knows it. And so he said, if you want to really write what you had started out on, an Indic version of leadership. And you can at best use me as a case study. So the first condition he put was, you write, but it should be an academic book. It can't just be another book. And that's why 50 pages of the book is my research notes.
Yeah, I noticed that.
And the second condition he actually put strangely was, he said, this book should carry the message of India's understanding of leadership. We always think leadership is an imported concept. We get everything from the West. He said, for once, let's tell the world that we are older, richer, and valid. It's not an emotive description I give there. Every word I've written carries a load of research, and I stand by everything I've written. And so he said it should be a Vishwa Sandesh ka book. And the third condition he put, which is not in my hands, he said, after people read this book, we need 1,000 leaders to emerge for serving this nation. So this is why I wrote it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for writing it. I'll come to this question later as to Mr. Modi is still alive and many years to go. So why did you call in the subtitle Legacy of Modi? He still has some more years to go. So Pankaj, we are contemporary journalists. We both started at the Economic Times. We've been business journalists. And another thing common between us is that we have tried to venture into the new media. So we are here to discuss his book, which is there on the screen, Against the Grain, Lessons from the Outliers. So what he's done in the book, or should I ask you to explain? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't even consider myself to be an author. And, sitting with someone who got arrested once and another one who's fearing an arrest and, has hundreds of books and very renowned author, someone who's very good to talk to, the warmth you feel. I will be honest, I am not an author. And this is my first book. The second thing I want to mention is the day the book came out, I went to Twitter to share that, okay, if you like, you buy. And my Twitter account was suspended. And I was like, what's happening here? So then I reflected back. Over the decade or more, I have received everything from a death threat to all kinds of emails and messages, very rarely fan emails, very rarely. And that's because of the other Pankaj Mishra. So I just want to put it on record. I have to put it on record perhaps because he's naughtier than me, I don't know. If you see him around today, please ask him to either get on social media or buy me food for life. Okay, so all the disclaimers made. I have only read few books in my life. This wasn't even an attempt to write a book. I was doing a series of audio conversations called Outliers in 2016, and I was very selfish in doing those conversations. I was going around meeting people like a mailman, asking them why they do what they do. And that pursuit took me from Kunnur, where I met Rakesh Sharma, to Sonam Wangchuk in Leh, and so many other not so famous people. And Penguin has been asking me to turn it into a book, but the idea of writing a book is not something I was keen. So this is not a book I have written. This is a curation of those conversations, and it acquired the form of a book.
What challenges did you face converting podcasts into a book?
There was no challenge. I had listeners who turned readers. The spoken words traveled onto the pages that you can read. So for me, I didn't think of format. I don't think of format when I'm trying to tell a story or share a story. For me, it's a story. It travels in the format that is the most suitable. In fact, I also believe that even one is an audience. So I have shared stories in train journeys with strangers, one-on-one and so on. So yeah, I mean, this is about me as the author, who I am not.
Yeah, congratulations on your first book. I'm sure you'll get inspired after coming here to write more. Yeah, coming the reverse way, Dr. Balu, could you answer that legacy question?
Actually, the epilogue of the book, and I got to say that in that context is why the subtitle is The Leadership Legacy of Narendra Modi. Now, I analyzed 50 years of his public life. Right from the time he was 17, he started moving around the country till 19 incognito. That's the time though I discovered a lot as an author, I had to respect his sentiment. I have not written anything except saying when he went to the Ramakrishna mission and wanting to be a monk. And I could validate all that information. But 50 years of his life, from a pracharak, from an organizing secretary of a party, to a chief minister of a state, then to the prime minister, and having worked at the grassroots, even to get elected as a panchayat member in the places where I have worked, is quite a journey for people. To negotiate the complexities of Indian politics today, to negotiate the barriers to entry and to end up in the highest office is not easy. With all the criticism that gets thrown at somebody, and watching him in action unperturbed and working such long hours, I thought, what is it that is driving him this much? And so what is the legacy that we can draw from that? And what legacy that we can draw from India's leadership? So the last chapter, the epilogue, is titled The Dharma of Legacy. So I analyzed, should we even look at legacy? And what is the dharma of such legacy? Now we talk of Yudhishthira, we talk of Bhishma, we talk of Shankaracharya. Okay, and we immediately think Advaita is Shankaracharya's legacy. Advaita existed before Shankara, it will exist after Shankara. But we equate him to legacy. So in that context, how do you equate a set of powerful concepts that gets expressed as public leadership, mostly in this case? And so what is the dharma of legacy itself? In a very generic way I analyze, nothing to do with him. And then talk about the legacy of dharma itself. And like Gurcharan ji said, the dharma can be interpreted differently, and in the outset itself, I said how I interpret it. And so that is, in that context, I talk about the leadership legacy of Narendra Modi as a powerful opportunity and a tool available to solve possibly current problems of the world, where I look at the Purusharthas and I look at how the Indic thinking, which he represents in many different ways, if used as an appropriate leadership tool in the global context, possibly you will never have another Ukraine or a Middle East or all these challenges that we have. And to conclude, if you can recall the call given in the G20 after very, very difficult or a non-starter in Bali to get a declaration, to actually India getting out a declaration in Delhi. The G20 declaration the Prime Minister gave was the 4 Ps. He gave it in a different language. He said people, planets, prosperity and peace. And I argue that it's only the Indian dharmic way in thinking of that. That's the legacy I talk about, to reach that. Because he's articulated it, I wrote the chapter after the G20 and added it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you. just one last question to Mr. Das, and then we are opening out for questions. So be ready with your questions. After writing India Unbound, now in your, I think in your book on the dilemma of Indian liberal, you are not too happy how India is shaped today from when you wrote India Unbound to now. Can you briefly tell us why you think so?
Well, you know, I want to go back to Mr. Modi. And he's written a book on Mr. Modi, The Legacy of Mr. Modi. And very rightly he's pointed out how polarized we are as a society. And if by the criteria of Raj Dharma that I would lay out, how would we measure Mr. Modi? I would say, yes, certainly one criteria I pointed out was modesty. A good leader walks behind his people, not in front of his people. And when the people achieve what they do, they say, we did it. Now, he's not that kind of leader. He's clearly a bigger-than-life leader. But then I also said that we should judge a leader only by the consequences of his deeds and not by his personal style. So it doesn't matter whether he is a bigger-than-life leader or not. Some people like that, some people don't like it. But in terms of the consequences of his world, it's a very mixed record. Meaning, there's a lot of good that has happened. The digital revolution has taken place. We have made India one country with GST. And certainly the infrastructure has improved. The road mileage has doubled since 2011. Port handling capacity has quadrupled in the last 12 years. And so there are a number of very good, and you know, toilets in the rural areas, cooking gas in the rural areas, pipe water in the rural areas. All these are very good things. But there's been a lot of damage. The polarization we are talking about is not a good legacy. And the reality is that both majoritarianism and Islamophobia are not really what our country is all about. Our country is about plurality. Our country, you know, in a country of 330 million gods, I mean, no god can afford to feel jealous. And that's what we are. So we are a people, when the Christian missionaries came to Bengal, the people welcomed them. And they say, no problem. We've got already 330 million gods. We can get one more. And they gave a choice to the peasants of Bengal, to the missionaries, that would you like Jesus Christ to be an avatar of Vishnu or Shiva? Now, you see, this is how we are. And so, frankly, I believe that the shelf life of Hindutva is limited because it goes against the temper of our country. So, in short, it's a mixed record. But ultimately, when we are talking about leadership and many understandings of leadership, I think that what I have learned over this time is that attitude matters more than skill or even intelligence when it comes to leadership. And so there's a story I tell in my memoir about a chap called Kamble, who came to us as a night guard in Procter & Gamble company. And that chap was amazing. I mean, he was exactly what Krishna lectures Arjuna, that he cared for the job getting done and didn't care who got the credit. That sort of person. He was that self-modest, self-effacing person. And I think that lesson for me, I mean, the guy rose and rose and rose to the top in the company. And it's worth remembering these things, because we get overly obsessed with people's degrees, being whether doctor or Mr., you know. Anyway, enough said. The audience now,
Yeah.
let them ask questions.
Thank you so much. That was quite a frank and view. Can I open it out to questions? Can you?
Hello. Yeah. I just want to know how much can we attribute the current polarization to the government, where entire world is being polarized by the social media and everything, like America and entire Europe for immigrants, and how much can, like, we cannot imagine the world now without any polarization or anything. So how much, like, how can we describe to Bala sir, to you sir? So how can we do
it's a good
that?
question. It's a good question. The reality is, in every country, the polarization has different roots. In America, it's anti-immigrant, or Europe, it's anti-immigrant polarization. It's between the left and the right. And in India, also, our polarization is between it's the polarization of the Hindus versus the Muslims. So, in other places too, it's against Muslims, by the way. It's not India. There's a huge Islamophobia around the world. But we were kind of a model, you know. We regarded, India was created in 1947 by saints who, and it happened under the shadows of Hitler, Stalin, Mao, and Mussolini. And our country was a kind of beacon of light, you know, of acceptance of our plurality. So that's what I just wanted to remind us. Now that too was very idealistic, and so on.
Yeah.
My question is to Dr. Balasubramaniam. At the risk of being committing heresy, can I whisper Modi's name in the breath of Gandhi? Toynbee once said that Gandhi had the mind of a democrat and the might of a dictator. Would you find the leadership styles, unusual as it might seem, to be actually similar in many ways?
I would like you to read the book. Because it's very easy for us, today's flavor of the season could be, it's easy to bash a person than a process. It's easy to bash one figurative head of a country than the entire country. Now, like you were saying, I was teaching at Cornell. I actually resigned this year. You got to live and taste the wokism on a university campus to understand what it is. That's the process. I can't blame a student, I can't blame the president of the university or the chair of or dean of my school. The reality is, we got to measure people with the same yardstick that everybody you want to measure. Apples cannot be compared to oranges. It's a whole process. I've actually compared and written about 3 leaders in my book specifically, in the context of, I always believe leadership is in a context. It can never be seen in separation. Leadership is different in the different roles that you play, and roles operate in context. And so the way I have analyzed it is, I have seen Abraham Lincoln. I've tried to study his leadership very deeply. Lee Kuan Yew, from the public leadership space, is where I've analyzed, and Deng Xiaoping. What civilizational legacy they left from their country's perspective, and what did they actually leave behind, what did they actually leave forward also. Because we have the ability to judge them from the legacies today. Like Benedict said, we don't have the ability to judge a Prime Minister Modi. I've also compared him to what could Gandhi have been, the earthy groundedness that Gandhi brings in his thinking, and also Patel, because he gets compared to that too, because the firmness, the toughness, etc., in a particular context. And I also said, he also gets compared to his own party's earlier Prime Minister, Vajpayee, right? Everybody calls him a statesman automatically, and whatever they call Modi is Modi. So what I have tried to do in my book is not formed any conclusive adjectives of describing anybody. I have written a book on Indic leadership. And wherever appropriate, the manifestation, because we tend to always eulogize the past. And then what do? We put them on a pedestal, declare a jayanti, put a garland around them, prostrate and leave. How many of us understand Ambedkar's thinking? It's very easy to have April 14, put a statue and put a garland and then walk away, but not live his thought. Very few live his thought today. So I didn't want that to happen with my book and my research. So I said, I could write of Yudhishthira, I could write on Rajadharma, which in a Mahabharata context has been described so beautifully as a conversation between Yudhishthira and Bhishma. Rajadharma has been described in Ramayana as a conversation between Rama and Bharata. As much as in Yoga Sutras, Patanjali describes it differently, he doesn't use Rajadharma, the word. And more importantly, Chanakya writes, there are two things which he talks about. He talks about Yogakshema and Lokasangraha. But the most important, he says, the only person who can deliver this is somebody who can practice Indriya Nigraha. Indriya Vijayi is what he talks about. And I use these frameworks, right from the communication framework that comes from India's thinking, the Sadharanikaran framework, to what Modi deploys in his everyday tool as a prime minister. That's all I have access to watch him at. I can't claim something which I have not watched. From those aspects, I think the only way, I don't want to justify what I wrote, but I think you people have to read and then form a judgment.
Yeah,
And you may not agree with the judgment, that's fair.
Yeah. So, invitation to read Dr. Balu's book. After the session, he's available for book signing.
I just wanted to add something, this fine question
Quickly, we have more
this young man
questions.
asked. We're talking about polarization. And the polarization is also as much the fault of the liberals or the left, meaning that this rise of Hindutva is due partly to the elite culture of our country. It's a resentment against the elite everywhere. But in India, it's much worse because the elite speaks a foreign language. Look, imagine if a person who walked in here who did not know English, very bright young man who did not know English, he'd feel deaf in your own country 75 years after independence. So there is a tragedy because the brown sahibs stepped nicely into the shoes of the white sahibs, and there are a lot of causes and there are no easy answers to it. So there are many other factors behind it. I just think it's not black and white.
Yeah, that's a good clarification question. Young lady, yeah.
Thank you. I'm working as an assistant professor. Since I'm dealing with more of youth of this nation, my question is, what are the 3 values you would suggest to any emerging leaders, especially the youth of India? 3 values that they should carry as a leaders.
Okay.
Time is up, so let's make it.
Very sorry. You addressed it to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Sir.
I talked about attitude being more important than skills or intelligence. The 3 values contribute to that attitude. 1, I think determination is more important. Mr. Modi has determination. Second, well, you've written the book on Modi, so that's what we are.
You wrote on Mahabharata, you can't be a Yudhishthira either.
And, well, Mahabharata also has Duryodhan, you know. And
Shakuni also.
Second quality is humility. But the definition of humility is to take your work seriously and not yourself seriously. So live lightly, laghima, which is another Sanskrit word for the lightness of being. Light, not like a feather, but like a bird. The third quality is integrity. And integrity, we talked about Yudhishthira. You see it in action, not in words. If somebody talks too much about integrity, you should worry.
Can I take the added liberty of answering her from a
please.
youth's
That's the last-
perspective?
Yeah.
I have a very different articulation of what he said. But no, as a speaker, he has no choice. He'll bear with me for 30 seconds more. I think the first is it's not about you, it's about the work at the center. Most of the people today say, I should be seen to be at the center. It's not, it's just the work at the center. And to me, I also look at, disruption is going to be the norm of the world today, and how in this disequilibrium. So the way I look at it is, don't learn to operate from zones of competence. Students go to universities to acquire competence. It's the biggest mistake. If you really want to learn to exercise leadership, learn to operate from zones of your incompetence. He wants to add the last one.
No, long time since the opening remark. Well, one word I'll say, I'm not on right or left, and I take pride in that. For me, the word that sticks, the phrase is courage to care. Whether you are a leader of the masses or an individual person, caring is not enough. I've been part of a lot of these deliberation sessions. People seem to care. But do you have the courage to care, which is a following act? And for me, that's the biggest attribute, no matter who is here or there.
I think that's a really good closing thought. Thank you so much to BLF for inviting us. We had an amazing panel. Thank you.